today then we are introducing Simon Plummer. I say we're introducing. It might be useful for yourself to tell us who you are, what you do, what the company is, and give us a bit of an introduction.
Sure. So I'm Simon Plummer, Director and Founder of Collective Security, formerly Collective Solutions Group, and we've split into two trading arms. So we've got Collective Inspiration, the creative agency side, and Collective Security, which is how to sum it up very, very simply is, I don't want to say consultancy because we're not a consultancy is in the normal sense, but we decided that small business needed affordable cybersecurity for their organisation. So that's everything from cybersecurity services, consultancy itself if they need that, or something simple as policy writing, documentation, that kind of thing. So we offer, again, the affordable end, I'll say, side of services which give SMEs a shot, shall we say. So they're increasingly coming under pressure from larger businesses in supply chain, and unfortunately they're just not equipped for that. So we bring that to the table.
I mean, it's a pretty comprehensive overview. It sounds like there's a lot of strings in the bow of the collective group. I mean, the next question is talking about journey and how you got to this point, but you mentioned something quite interesting there, which is the split from, what was it called before, sorry, Collective Solutions? Or
So we I suppose the history is we were a COVID-born company, if you like. So Kate and I, who is my partner in crime, if you like, she's my wife and business partner. She was a freelance account director. I was a consultant, just working, for other companies. And we were listening throughout COVID, through our conversations in the front spare room, as everybody else was at the time. And we realised there were so many synergies between what we do, which is why we had the company name, if you like, as a legal entity for invoicing, really. But that's when the two trading names came to life. And Collective Security essentially leaches through into Collective Inspiration. So we build security, secure by design, into everything we deliver on the creative side as well.
It's a really interesting synergy as well, because on the surface, as a layperson, shall we say, there's kind of a marketing and a graphic and a really kind of openly creative side, which people would say, oh, that is creative, and then there's the kind of nuts and the bolts and the structure, shall we say, which is more kind of yourself.
Exactly.
And it's, I think unfairly, cybersecurity is kind of lumped in with IT, and that becomes a bit of a kind of a less emotive subject, shall we say, than the arty and the creative. But there's this creativity in so many different kind of aspects of the work, and I think that maybe that's the commonality, is the way that you guys address a problem, and the fact that it is collective, the fact that you're looking at the problem from different perspectives, but you're looking at the same problem.
So what we look at, and you've probably heard us use the term in the past, is we don't believe in competition with other smaller organisations. We use the term co-opetition. We're all trying to get the same end result for our clients, which is a happy client, even if that's security or on the creative aspect. But in fact, a lot of our clients are creative agencies themselves that need that security support. Because again, they focus on the stuff they're really good at,
and of course,
they don't necessarily have the time to look at the security aspects as well, so we help them there as well.
It's a case study is probably like ourselves as architects. We kind of know what we're doing, and in some cases we kind of expand our role, including operating a co-working space, which we didn't know what we were doing when we first did that, and you get people around you who do know what they're doing, like yourselves, and hopefully kind of plug gaps, and that's the idea, really, isn't it, behind the collaboration, as you say. What was the word? The
co-opetition.
Co-opetition. I need to write that down. Yeah, that's a good one. Good. I mean, so the journey then in earnest was from 2020. I mean, that's similar to us as well. We set up in the pandemic. What was the trigger, if you don't mind me asking? I mean, you've worked in different roles and you've been together a little while. So at what point did you say, right, I don't want to be working for these people, I want to be working for myself and doing this?
Wow. So I think I mentioned previously I've been sort of in this industry for 20 odd years now. And I sort of went through. I had comfortable corporate roles. I was head of InfoSec for one of the major big 6 energy firms in the UK. All of the benefits. I began to feel that I was a voice that wasn't being heard, and you would sit there in these lovely comfortable positions, and then an external consultant would come sweeping in and just say in one sentence what you've been saying for the last 3 years, and suddenly it would get done. And that was incredibly frustrating. So I decided to consider moving into a consultancy role. I get one more company in the health sector at a shot before going into that area, and that didn't work out because guess what? It became the same old thing. And when I said, "Well, what security budget have we got?" They said, "Well, your salary is the budget." I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to leave. It's not going to work out." And that made my mind up that I wanted to be that consultant that swept in. And the trigger to that was because I then managed to enact change with all my clients, and that was probably the most satisfying thing ever, because it's easy to become stagnant, I think, in a role, especially when it's comfortable, good money, good pensions, all the benefits.
100%, yeah.
But I wasn't happy. So since then, it's just great.
Sounds like it's quite a brave step as well, like you say, to be 20 years into a role or into an industry, and to know the role and feel the frustrations. Because I've in my early career was surrounded by people, in later in their careers, and maybe 40s and 50s, who had been there for 20, 30 years in that environment, who, unlike yourself, they were baked in. They were like almost disgruntled and disengaged, but baked in. So they were like, and I remember they explicitly said to me on a number of occasions things like, "I just can't leave. I'd love to do this, but it's just not practical. I just can't," because, like you say, the benefits of employment can be quite binding. They can be quite, particularly when you've got responsibilities as you have as well, with children and a mortgage and things. You've got this survival budget, and I'd be interested to hear kind of your take on this, because when we set up our practice, the first thing we said to it is, what do we need to live? What do we need to make to just keep the lights on, keep some beans on the table, and just live? So I mean, were you in a position where you were able to kind of take a bit more of what's the word I'm looking for here, a holistic approach, and take some space to think about it, or did you have to get things moving straight away?
From a timing perspective, it was quite lucky, shall we say. So I was historically the main earner in that regard.
Right.
So Kate had been freelancing for a number of years, and we figured out, well, if she didn't get a contract for whatever, we could cope.
You can manage, yeah.
However, if we lost my salary, that would probably be a different story at the time. And I call it stepping off the proverbial cliff, because that's essentially what it was. It made no financial sense whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, that's why I say it sounds.
We ascertained that it was about happiness and mental state,
for sure,
over money and golden handcuffs.
So
by pure luck, it was a contract. Just as I was considering leaving the last place, a contract came up that was pretty much going to be as long as I wanted it to be, and it was with the police, so it was secure. It was a solid contract, so a really good first one to go into that gave you the security while you got into that motion.
Yeah. And
then from there, you can be looking for the next one and the next one and the next one and so on. So that's how we managed to do it. It was scary. I think I remember sitting in the pub the day I left, and I was almost in tears. Saying, "What have I done? This is ludicrous."
like you say, when you write down the financials and the kind of support system on one hand, and then the lack of any of that on the other, and the lack of detail, it's very difficult, isn't it, to forecast at the early stages.
It was. We'd managed to obviously save a bit of backup, shall we say?
Yeah.
But I think fundamentally, it was down to that first contract. But with everything, there's peaks and troughs, and you make hay while you can.
Well, that's absolutely it, isn't it? Yeah.
And that's the key, I think, is insulating yourself from the economy as much as possible, so that you can absorb or not.
What's interesting, I mean, I've done a couple of these podcasts with various members of the space now, and one of the key phrases which comes out of this is similar to what you just said there, which is I've decided that happiness is important, that well-being is important, and the timing is, always in and around 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
And I think, for obvious reasons, people are pressurised because of the pandemic, and they're reflecting on the workspace and the work package and the next, maybe, not to get too philosophical, but it sort of maybe clarifies the mortality of everything, the fragility and the temporality of life, and and particularly I guess when you've got young children, you kind of want to spend more time with them, and you really that dynamic is what you strive for. So it's that recalibration, I think, which I find really interesting, and I think viewers and the listeners will as well, because what I'm trying to do with this series, in addition to find out about the business, it's kind of finding more about yourself, what drives you, and what's the Simon origin story, I guess, is what we're getting at. And when we get into that sort of personal section, I think it's interesting to see that journey before you went on this kind of commercial, or this, shall we say, professional journey, because when we strip away the kind of parameters of the profession and the job, there's a lot of kind of similarities and commonalities which I think people might kind of learn from, because, and I think we're going to touch on that time and time again, this idea that you've taken a risk and it has paid off, touch wood, it continues to, and it seems like things are going really well, but it's that personality which has accepted that could go really badly, but I'm still going to take it because it's worth the trade-off. You've done the assessment. I don't imagine for everything you said and everything I know about you, you're not an uncalculated person. You've done the sums, you've done the kind of equation, you've arrived at the conclusion that actually, if it doesn't work, then it's worth the risk. So I think if you wouldn't mind, it'd be good to sort of dial back and understand, the early stage of your life. You're from Nottingham, from Beeston, I understand.
So I'm Nottingham, Beeston, born and bred.
And how was that? I mean, what was life like growing up?
Beeston was, well, it still is really an excellent town. Again, it's changed a lot in the last few years, just like many. I went to university in Leicester and came straight back after I finished. Because
dare I ask the reasons? Any?
Just because Beeston and Nottingham was much better than Leicester, so all those Forest fans out there will hopefully be cheering a little. But so never felt the need to leave. I think that's the point. Everything there is on your doorstep, which is great. We've got good schools for the kids. We've now obviously moved into the city with the office, and everything kind of just works. So we've never needed to move. So Kate, on the other hand, has travelled. I think when I met her, 20 years ago. She'd moved 10 times in 10 years, so for her to see the routes that I had, in good old Beeston, where I could almost walk down every street and I'd have a story about it. Even people in the shops would wave and say hello Simon, all of that kind of thing from just growing up.
It's a bit like Alien. What? People know you?
And so I think that's where probably our differences match, because I like the stories of her travelling, she likes the routes that I've got, and she's sort of integrated into that life really well when we're married, so that's what we chose to stay.
And did you go to university? Leicester University.
Yeah.
So what was it you studied there?
Computer science.
Okay.
Well, it's De Montfort, Leicester, not Leicester Uni, which is where I met Kate.
Right.
So we met at university. She was studying media and performing arts.
Okay, I mean the two strands are already in play there, aren't they?
Yeah, completely.
I love that. And then was it after that she went to university and you came back to Nottingham, or she went travelling? Shall I say?
No, she wasn't travelling necessarily. It was just a family moved.
Oh, sorry.
So she had everything from off licences to. I think it was 800 acres farms in Wales.
Interesting. That's quite the jump.
Crazy, like moving around all the time. But wow. I'll leave most of that for her podcast, maybe. But so it was very. Yeah, essentially we met there and then got married officially in 2010, but we've been together for 20 years now. which is how we can live together, work together, bring kids up together, and not murder each other.
Yeah, well, I was about to say,
a lot of people are still surprised about.
There's a lot of pressure there, isn't there, when you're kind of living together, working together. So you have to have a really strong dynamic, I imagine, and understand each other's sort of, signs and pressure points, and have that dynamic which complements and supports one another.
Exactly, and that comes through into the business as well. So, which is why we bring her skills into the security side as that account director, because she's probably got better account management skills than me. So I'm good at what I do, but maybe at that agency level, dealing with the clients a bit more, that's kind of her bag. And so playing on both skills for both sides of the business.
And it's drawing that line, isn't it? It's quite, as we experienced a very similar thing when we started setting up the what is now Art Design Studio. We figured out kind of each of the strengths and weaknesses and tried to kind of fit them together so that collectively, again, the word keeps coming up, doesn't it? The strengths, it was a very strong presentation. We weren't kind of lacking in any area, and it feels like that's kind of where you guys have landed. You've sort of found that sensible kind of compromise which allows you both to kind of pick up on each other's weaknesses and maximise the strengths.
And that was the conversation we had in that lockdown moment, because that was the whole synergies, because then we were just sort of individual, or very individuals in what we did, and the deciding moment was, why are we both doing all this for other people? Why don't we do it ourselves? And formalising it into that structure a bit more made it feel real, proper, proper business, if that makes sense, rather than just a freelancer or a consultant.
Absolutely. Did you, prior to that, had you had conversations about setting something up, or was it just a kind of trigger point within lockdown which made you have that conversation?
It was that trigger point there, just from listening to each other. And it felt that it would give us that little bit more structure and security of running a proper business, if that makes sense. I'm not saying consultants and freelancers aren't a proper business, but a more formalised business that has some almost, which would have a legacy to it. Potentially. If it
I get that. So you're building up that sort of brand and capital within the brand, which you can, at a future point you can reevaluate, and that's got value, isn't it? So I think it's quite a common contemplation where people are thinking about employment and being an employer, and it's not an easy decision by any measure. And I think there's, as you sort of suggested earlier in your talk, the fact that you have to learn new skills and you have to wear a number of hats, and some of those hats are maybe a little bit less enjoyable than others, and it's kind of trying to do things which maybe do put you out of your comfort zone in some ways, but the trade-off is always that idea that, as you said at the beginning, you're the person in the room and people are listening to, and you also have now the agency to take a decision and follow through with it, instead of just being like shouting but your voice isn't being heard. So it's that giving you the voice, I suppose.
Exactly that.
Just going back to the sort of personal section, and if I may, I mean, you talked about you growing up in Beeston. In terms of your kind of surroundings, was there any particular influence or influences which kind of propelled you into IT? I mean, IT at that point is as is now, it's quite a rapidly developing environment. So what we think about as IT is probably quite delayed for most people, because the cutting edge of that industry is always so far ahead. I think is more so than I think we can comprehend at times.
I mean, going back, I can just remember as a child, I always loved computers in some way. So, go back, security isn't an IT problem, by the way. I've just got an IT background. So, I remember getting and this will show my age, I think the first computer I got was a BBC Model B, which is what all the schools used at the time. So I thought my parents bought one, so that we used what the schools used, and I was really posh because I had a double disk drive.
A disk drive?
Double disk drive.
The floppy disks.
And that was from everything from basic coding and things at a very basic level to just games and messing around. And from there I've always
Minesweeper.
It's not even that. It's just sort of dots on the screen really. But and then obviously moved into more modern PCs and all that kind of thing. So I've always had IT in my life in some manner. From a moving into sort of the security side was a bit different, and mentioned it earlier that the reason that happened was because I got breached or hacked myself. That made me then focus more on IT security, and then from there that's when I moved into more, I suppose, governance, risk, compliance, information security, organisational security. So having that IT background, so I worked in IT for 10 years, so everything from help desk all the way up to sort of third line support. Having that sort of both sides, sort of both poacher and gamekeeper.
Yeah, that's a good way.
And that helps me to talk to boards and IT departments alike, and translate a problem or a risk either way.
Yeah,
so I think that's
on the fence, looking at both sides.
Exactly.
I suppose what's interesting there as well, in addition to that, is the idea that you kind of graduated into a rapidly expanding field, and pre-internet, early internet.
I suppose, yeah.
And obviously, the internet's the point where everything gets plugged in together, and then that's all kind of. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's kind of the foundation of where you are now and where your focus is, because now we're talking about looking at those plugs and saying, well, some of these are quite malign, and we need to kind of make sure that we're disengaging, or if they are plugged in, then we've got protections around core systems to prevent any security threats and such. But what's interesting, I mean, again, another parallel from some of the other episodes that we've filmed is this idea that we, at school and university, or in college as well, of course, the formal education route is often quite prescribed, and it makes you narrow down your focus really early on in your life, and you make decisions which you don't even no idea what the impact will be further down the line. But I think what's interesting in this case, and in many others I suppose, is that you've selected what would have at once point been quite a niche area of interest, IT. People, I guess there was probably always a general understanding that IT would develop and that would be a huge field and would kind of shoot off into various other avenues. But the fact that you kind of make this decision, you have no idea where you're going, and you kind of the kind of tracks being laid as you're kind of barreling down it, isn't it? So understanding, and I suppose you've always had to, and again I'm putting sort of words in your mouth, so do correct me if I'm wrong, but you've kind of had to be quite kind of dynamic in how you approach things, because it might be that the track which is laid in front of you isn't of interest or isn't something you want to kind of get involved with, and you might draw your boundary and say, no, I'm just doing this kind of security. Do you feel that is a kind of reflection of you as a person? Do you think you're quite a kind of, what's the word, like somebody who really enjoys expanding the knowledge base and looking for the next thing, or it?
To a degree, I suppose, going back to sort of the academia bit and the inspirational thing, even as a kid, I just remember growing up and Richard Branson was my inspirational person, basically, because he was successful without any formal academic qualifications. And I generally struggled through academia. Some people it's quite natural. I was awful at that revision or getting the work in the deadlines. I'd procrastinate all over the place, and so it wasn't really for me. And I think having that mentality, going back to the train tracks, enables me to maybe procrastinate correctly, if that makes sense, to actually say, right, no, I'm going to go this way today, or that way. And anybody that knows me knows that if I want to throw myself into something, I'm the king of researching everything to death until I'm almost an expert in it, even if it's just anything like buying a new TV. I will know everything about every single TV on the market at any given time, like for that period. And then I'll move on to the next thing. So yes, I might not keep up on TV technology, but when it comes around again, then I'll do exactly the same thing. So I tend to want the best, if that makes sense. So,
the cost of value, and like this is what I'm saying when I referenced earlier, that I know that you're not somebody that just makes decisions like loosely. It's very resolved and very detail focused. which is great. I mean, you mentioned Richard Branson. Is there anybody else? I mean, would you say he's kind of a big influence in how you have approached business more generally, or would you say there's any of the kind of people around you or people that you would kind of identify as being influential characters in your life as you've kind of made these big decisions?
I'll be honest, I tend to push against that.
Mm-hmm.
I even hate the term influencer.
Mm.
You know, that's obviously near in there at a minute, and I
Yeah.
feel like I just don't like it. It doesn't rest easy with me.
It sounds like you're being influenced in a
Yeah,
negative way.
that's control and
Yeah.
all of these things. So again, me being me, it's like I almost push against that intentionally or harder rather than just ignoring it. I tend to switch off to it. Whereas good old Mr. Branson, he's a bit more that calm, collected. Started off selling records, mail order or whatever it was, which became Virgin and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But without any formal backing or qualifications, which drove me to say, well, if he can do it, anybody can be successful if they want to, and it's up to you to put the time and put the effort in and be successful.
I think
and you're only answerable to yourself. That's the
it's that mentality as well, isn't it? As you said there, it's I can do that, because I know so many people think I can't do that.
Yeah.
That's
yes.
The amount of times I expect you had the same things in kind of your friendship circles. When you talk about setting something up, it's are you sure? Like there's a lot of second guessing, and for me, when I was setting up ARC, it was always I think you need a bit more experience being an architect before you set up an architecture practice, and I sometimes try and flip that and say, well, no, because I think I think we touched on this earlier in the conversation, was you kind of get baked into a role quite quickly, and it's very hard. It's like taking the eggs out of a baked cake, isn't it? It's a cake. You can't get back to that point. So before you get to that, you've got the ingredients. Why don't I bake something different? It doesn't have to be that. So it's understanding, like. And I think communicating that you can take your skill set at any point in your career and you can repackage it. But the longer you leave it, maybe the harder it is.
It's really funny you said that, because when I first left the corporate world, and I'd be there, I'd sort of, I don't know, do a PowerPoint presentation or whatever, and I'd normally sort of practice to Kate beforehand. And it used to drive her mad, because she said, Simon, you're just so corporate. And because even the design of my PowerPoint presentations would be dull and boring.
Next slide.
Next slide. But that's how it. I don't know why it has to be done like that in the corporate world. It just seems to have stuck.
Yeah.
And I had sort of 18 years in that environment, and I like to think we've got it out of me now, because that's how sort of we deal with our clients differently.
Yeah.
In the sense that we say it how it is rather than what they want to hear. Which is when I said I don't want to sort of be referred to as a consultancy, because I find often maybe the full truth isn't described in the way it should be. So sometimes I'll tell things people don't want to hear, but that's what they're paying me to do, really. And unless they hear it, they can't enact change. So yeah, no more corporate monotone.
I think for me, and I hope you'll agree, for me corporate translates to being safe, and there's no innovation or excitement or what's the word, energy around that environment, which I think you probably share the same sort of trait. It's like it doesn't kind of appeal to me. It's not something which I think, I just want to sit below the parapet, and I want to just coast. I want to actually do something impactful and more meaningful.
Exactly.
And that corporate life, it's like you say, sometimes you might have a conversation with a client and you might say something which they don't like, and it might in the short term impact the business. They might say, oh no, I didn't like that, the way you spoke to me or what you said to me, but at least you are standing by your values. You are able to kind of demonstrate your value, and even if in the moment they think, no, that wasn't right, they'll come back later, I'm sure, and be like, actually, what you did say, this has happened, and I'm so glad you told me, because now I've thought that I'll do X, Y, and Z, and you build a much stronger and more progressive relationship than, I say, a big company which sometimes just advises you to do the bare minimum, to just stay below that parapet the entire time. Yeah,
exactly that, and I've actually won contracts with clients on the back of being different in that way, that some found it quite refreshing, that it's another consultant coming in and he's, I'll give you X, Y, and Z, and we'll
Sales.
blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Whereas I'd be looking at more innovative ways of looking at things. And it doesn't have to be all exciting stuff, and you do have to do some of the boring basic stuff. But okay, how can we leverage new technology? How can we leverage some of this stuff? And as long as you go with a solution, not just a problem, that's the difference. I think, I'll identify some problems, always do, but actually it's not that hard to fix. We can do X, Y, and Z, and it's quite easy. But if you want like the gold package, you need to invest, and we'll do this and this. So leave it up to them.
What I mean, just that kind of teases up nicely for the next question in the sense that what do you think is the most important lesson that you've taken away from that? I'm not going to say the entire career, because I mean, summary of 20 years in the industry is okay. What's the important lesson? I think we'll keep it down to that transition from the corporate world to the world that you've now created around your new business venture. What is the most important lesson in that for you?
I think it's being happy in your work. I don't think I really truly knew what being happy in work was. I was comfortable. Comfortable's not happy. Whereas when I was comfortable and Kate was freelancing, working for loads of different people, amazing clients, clearly loved what she did, genuinely loved what she did, and still does. It was like looking through that window, and I think flicking over, then you get a taste for it, and it's like, I see the difference here. And that's why I like the startups, the smaller organisations, because they are more flexible, more forward-thinking, open to ideas. If they come through to me, the very fact of contacting me means, wow, okay, they've made a first step here. Hopefully it's because they haven't had an incident, but which does happen.
Bring them up.
But I think the happiness, again, it's that being that consultant or that supportive organisation that floats in to help people, and they just listen and do what you say within reason. That is the gemstone, if you like, where it's actually 100%. You can leave. I did some great work with another company, a gaming company, and yes, they didn't renew the contract, but I wanted to make sure that they were left in a good state so the work we'd done didn't just end up in a draw. So I made sure I built the team up, I recruited the new head of security, built a team, and then handed that over, and I thought, right, okay, it's in a good place. So the pride there in the work I'd done, I wanted that to remain, if that makes sense. So
100%.
That was a good feeling as well.
Well, it's that kind of cause and effect, isn't it? It's having that sort of feedback loop maintained. I mean, is it the case that in your previous role you would kind of make decisions, or you'd be part of a team that makes decisions, and then things would happen, and they'd probably have quite a lot of outputs, but you weren't always as close to the output as you'd like to be?
Exactly, yeah. So you wouldn't necessarily see the results.
It's massively rewarding, isn't it?
More of a European company who would then overrule things, but they didn't really understand the UK situation, so it wouldn't really fit, and it'd be quite frustrating. You didn't have the control. I think that's, I'm not saying I'm a control freak or anything, but it's having the
agency, yes.
The agency to actually come in, spot a problem, fix the problem, implement it, and leave it in a good place, and move on. And you can then hand on heart say, we did a good job there, and really, really happy with it.
Yeah, the feedback loop thing is certainly something which pushed us to make that decision as well. I think that's something which is almost innate within us as kind of human beings, is that being able to see what we've achieved. Maybe I'm not a sort of psychologist by any measure, but I think it feels almost like primal to just see something you've done and to reflect on it. If you separate somebody so far from the process, and you become a sort of, pigeonholed, or you're in a conveyor belt, whatever analogy or metaphor we need. But if your focus is narrowed, I think it's very difficult to kind of be engaged with and committed to or motivated by that environment. I mean, just on that, the next question kind of leads nicely into that. What is it at this point in time which motivates you? I mean, you mentioned happiness. Would you say that's the motivation, or is it something more specific?
It is happiness, and that sort of, I suppose, is a multitude of things underneath that. And what is happiness to me?
Yeah.
So that's obviously.
But it's quite subjective,
family
isn't it?
life.
Yeah.
Keep the kids safe, secure. I had a good upbringing. I want to give them a good upbringing. Look at, and I mentioned it earlier, having that legacy.
Yeah.
I'm not about leaving a big, celebrity thing behind me or anything like that. It's just more, having something either to pass on to the kids, be that the business, if they want it. If not, I'm not. If they want to take a different path, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I think just having something, I think it probably boils down to the kids being proud. Actually, I think that's a really good driver.
For sure, yeah. And seeing what you do and enjoying it, appreciating it.
Yeah, Jack, our eldest, he completely he's engrossed with what I do, and he asks questions all the time. He gets it when I lock his Roblox account down, whereas most kids would curse at their parents. He understands.
Yeah.
That's really good. I don't know if the youngest will be the same, but we'll see.
Yeah, time will tell. I mean, this next section is more about your kind of expertise, I suppose, in cybersecurity. But again, we can expand that if needs be. But what sort of differentiates you and your business from your competitors? I mean, we discussed it briefly at the beginning, but kind of summarising that.
So we put a lot of emphasis on, and mentioned it on, we sort of say it how it is. We don't gloss it over, but also we'll talk in a language which is fit for the business that we're dealing with. A creative agency would behave very differently to barrister's chambers.
Sure,
for instance. So
it's tailored.
Yeah, it's tailored, and versus maybe a larger consultancy firm which sort of just send. Not saying individually they haven't got personalities, but when it's that sort of big brand coming in, they have to adhere to a certain way of their brand rather than the customer, whereas we're customer centric, so we look at it completely the other way, and we adapt for the client, and which is why historically we didn't offer services, and it would just seem like a silly gap, really. Why am I going into a business and then saying go over there for that very expensive service?
Yeah.
Where I know of all these other things out there, but I can't recommend them for whatever reason. So that's when we started onboarding services ourselves to bring the availability, because a lot of these businesses they don't want Simon to come in as collective and say, right, you've now got to go to supplier A, B, C, and D, and get a test done over there. They just want Simon to do it.
Yeah.
So we offer that holistic package of security, fit and tailored to your business. So we don't come in with just a standard default package that you should have that kind of thing. It's more, okay, what is your budget? Where do you want to be? We can start small and scale up. We can offer the services you need. We almost have that bronze, silver, gold level as well. So if you want to start small, you can have just a really affordable level. We'll just get some basics in, get the foundations in, and then hopefully you'll see the benefit of that, and then maybe think about stepping it up a bit more.
I mean, I think that's a really useful part, I think, of being a small business, is the agility of it and the way that you can sort of frame things in a tailored and thoughtful way. Whereas, it's not to say you can't tailor things and you can't be thoughtful in a big organisation, but like you say, there's a sort of brand voice, and there's a hierarchy, an internal hierarchy, which I think sometimes sanitises the approach.
Yes.
So it's good to kind of be a little bit more client-centric.
Definitely.
What do you think when you set up the business? I mean, obviously you've been in the industry for a long while. I imagine you've seen things. You've seen a lot when it comes to security, and you were stepping off a cliff, but you knew what the water was beneath you. You'd appraised that environment for 20 odd years. So I imagine you weren't too surprised by what you met. But were there any things? And it could be, as we talked about before, the sort of tangential things of running a business. Was there anything in particular which surprised you when you set up company?
How much time the admin takes.
100%.
Yeah, I underestimated that, and that. At first, I enjoyed it, and then it just became a bind. Let's be honest. I think we probably all feel that way. So I'm sure it's people that love doing the admin roles, which is why hopefully we'll hit a point where we're going to get people to do that for us.
It's that transition, isn't it? Getting, as Kate was saying earlier, I think it's that idea that I'm the same. I mean, Kate is Ewan and James in some respects in that dynamic, and it's me that's kind of holding the reins for various things. And like, just let go. It's like, no, because I feel like I know it, I understand it. This is important, and it's at some point you've got to hand those over to somebody. But when and where is that kind of sensible? So I share that challenge for sure. It's not easy. I think one of the benefits, and I suppose, of being in partnership with not just a friend on this occasion, of course, but your partner of 20 years, is you've got each other in the highs and the lows. But I guess I'm sort of jumping ahead and assuming that this is the answer to your question, but you might have another one here. But who do you talk to when you are stuck on things?
It's Kate.
Yeah, I thought it might be.
We get each other, so it's just. Sometimes she'll identify that I'm stuck before I know it. So that's
good.
I think that's the key. Certainly with mental health awareness at the minute, it's that "Are you okay?" question. Yeah,
asking it is the most important thing, isn't it?
And I'm probably not the best at saying I'm stuck or I need help or whatever. I'll just sort of blinkers on. But she's a very good artist when it comes to dragging me out of that. So I think that's probably down to people skills and everything that goes with it, professionally as well as personally. But so definitely Kate is my at least initial go-to.
Yeah,
I do go to my dad. He's a successful now retired businessman, so always pin him down for a bit of advice. I have to take some of it with a pinch of salt. He's probably somewhat out of date in some areas these days, but
old school techniques.
When he talks about his catalogue and things, I'm like, well, Dad, that's what my website is essentially like. We don't have catalogues anymore.
Just translate. You've got to translate the feedback, and then you can,
it's the fundamentals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, that's interesting, and I think it is, particularly the small business. It's important to have somebody to turn to, isn't it? Yeah. I envy people who set up as sole traders, because I feel like and then I guess in the ARC ecosystem, ARC space, not to plug the space too heavily, but the idea that there's you can speak with other kind of freelancers, I think that's really important generally across co-working as a platform, because I think setting up, I don't know if you'd feel the same, but setting up a business on my own, I just feel like there'd be, whilst I can wear several hats, I can't wear all the hats, and there's certain things which I could probably do it to some extent, but I don't think I'd enjoy it. I don't think I'd be successful in doing it in the way that, say, Ewan or James is, and I think in your case with Kate, it's having those different, like I said, at the beginning, it's drawing the lines of expertise and trying to kind of meld them together a little bit.
Agree, yeah, but I think it's also just exposure to people. So,
that's a good point.
As we said when we moved here, we were just craving interaction, and that's not because me and Kate were sick of each other, because we still sit in our little office doing the same thing, but just being able to walk in the morning and say morning, and have a bit of a chat, have a coffee or whatever, and just even that, it was like huge for us. And we were incredibly annoyed because when we were looking, we had our office in the square in Nottingham. And when we were looking for that, I think it was just before you guys had opened. So we
saying,
there a year, and then we were like, "Where have you come from? You weren't here."
Disappeared overnight.
We would have obviously
the banner.
But the difference that's made to our business as well is I think phenomenal, because
that's good.
Just from an exposure perspective, that it sort of energised us as soon as, because we in the other office, everyone was in their little white boxes that didn't speak to each other. People even hid from you in the shared kitchens. It was very strange, very strange place, and we felt ourselves stagnating. So we thought, we've got to do something about this, and then that's when we found you guys.
Well, I think it's culture, isn't it, which is really important. It's breeding an environment which people feel welcome in, and be energized to ask questions and to communicate with other people. And as you say, like, as we are as well, sometimes the business operations take priority and you've got to focus and just get things done, and you do become in a little bubble. But when that exercise or that phase of pressure is over, you turn around and there's somebody there to talk to, and there's other people around, and even if you are busy, you'll hear conversations and things happening, and I think just through osmosis you pick some of that up and you learn, and you're like, okay, well, that's interesting, I'll take a note of that, and maybe next time I speak to them in the kitchen I've got some tips, or I can learn something. So it's just having that, I think, awareness of other people. And I think that, again, going to the kind of indie business school thing that you very thankful that you engaged with earlier, it's that kind of thing which I think as small businesses will really benefit from, growing with each other, sharing what we do, how we do it, and I guess engineering an overlap so that we can do more together as a collective. Again, the word, it just...
Good name, isn't it?
It is a really good name. It's like a word generator, the most used positive word, collective. We'll go with that. So it's just creating opportunities to kind of grow the space. But I mean, we digress. We were talking about ArcSpace, and I appreciate it, but this is about you and your business. So I mean, I've got here, and I don't know if it's applicable to your industry necessarily, but is there, well, maybe it is. No, is there a common myth about your industry?
Oh
or
yes,
your job?
we've already touched on
the idea that it's
Well, I've got this real issue with the term cybersecurity because it gives those IT connotations. But I have to use it because that's the one that seems to resonate with people. But what we're really talking about is information security. We're trying to protect information. But yeah, the myth is information or cyber security, whatever you want to call it, is an IT problem. And I speak to a lot of potential clients where schools in particular, they I'll say, what about your information security, your cyber security, how do you protect? Oh yeah, our IT guys do all that. It's like, I can guarantee they don't, because they won't do all your awareness training, they won't be writing your policies, there won't be, somebody needs to hold them to account.
It's cultural, isn't it? It's not just a department. It's
exactly, but a business needs to have assurance that, so there is an IT aspect, obviously, but it's up to the business to tell the IT guys what they need. The IT guys can't say, well, what policies do you want? Because we'll give you them. And schools in particular just aren't equipped to do that, and they'll just buy off-the-shelf services which might work or might not. But I think there was a school literally this week that's been ransomware and blackmailed. I'm watching that with interest because I don't know what the outcome's going to be. Pretty much shutting down overnight again. So, and that's a school.
Yeah. A lot of sensitive data as well, isn't there, with those kind of environments which are dealing with minors.
Safeguarding information. We're actually talking, lives of children potentially affected. I'm hoping with, I suppose, academisation, things will change, because it gives them more nuance to do things themselves as part of within the academy. They don't have to do what the Department of Education say in regards to having this supplier, that supplier. They can actually broaden it and spend that money how they see fit. So I'd like to think that they might consider security a bit more closely.
You like to think, but like you say, it takes an oversight, doesn't it? It takes an understanding, and the first step there is getting the training and broadening the understanding, because, I mean, I won't say I consider myself incredibly young, but I'm young when it comes to kind of my engagement with IT was very fundamental when I was younger. Like, I remember games consoles were like my entire life for the best part of like 10-15 years, and then that advanced to more, shall we say, mundane technologies. But my parents and my grandparents, my parents' generation, probably the generation who typically at this point would be kind of head teachers and in senior positions within schools, who of course are decision makers. And if they don't have that sort of awareness of the criticality and the importance of getting these systems in place, then the conversation doesn't even start. So you sort of need to kind of have top-down, again, from my perspective, top-down governmental pressure to say, speak to somebody about this, and then let them, as you say there, with academisation otherwise, have the ability to reach out to who they think is the most appropriate fit, and then you could perhaps be getting in there and having the conversations with the relevant people in those sort of areas. But
completely,
completely. It's getting in there, isn't it? It
is, yeah. I mean, education's a funny old beast with sort of the bureaucracy around suppliers.
Of course, frameworks and all the rest of it.
A lot of people always say, I want to get into education and get into schools, though. I don't know why. Everyone seems to know it. I'd like to, but obviously we need to sort of bear in mind the lack of time and how much it takes to get in there. But I do. I've done a few voluntary pieces for my kids' school because I'm invested in that from a kid's perspective.
Of course, yeah.
Recently did a talk on smartphone use and mobile phone security for kids there, because there's a bit of a movement on at the moment.
I imagine that's it's incredibly important, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mentioned how Jack, my eldest, is invested in what I do, and we got him a dumb phone. It's a Nokia flip phone, and he absolutely loves it because it's got Snake. He said, "That's all you need."
Great game, isn't it?
Snake.
I mean,
it reminded me of my youth. Well, that was the only choice, to be fair. We only had Snake. But
I remember that game so well. So I've got really got two more questions for you. I feel this hour's gone by so quickly, isn't it? What advice would you give to somebody starting to look at a kind of career in your industry or in your field?
I'd say speak to the people in the field, because there's a lot of different generations of security types now. So I'm probably one of the old school in the sense that I've got the experience from the IT background through to board level. Whereas now because there is a cybersecurity skills gap, so there's been a lot of emphasis about getting cybersecurity degrees and all of this kind of thing. And that's great, but that's focusing again more on this IT side of things. Mm-hmm. There is still some way you can specialise in the risk side. But I think if you speak to the people on the ground, as you remember, I had a work experience going recently, just to get the oversight of the different areas, because again, with those connotations of the term cybersecurity, that masks the plethora of areas underneath it. Mm-hmm. And you'd be surprised how much is about communication skills as opposed to almost just sitting in a dark room doing computery cyber security. We've talked about it before, the typical hoodie, blank face, binary background, matrix thing going on. It sounds all glamorous, but actually there's a lot of it is about influencing heavy hitting stakeholders. And you need to be talking to the decision makers, the one that hold the purse strings, to actually decide what they're going to do with an organisation. So I was at a point in my career where I could actually take that active decision. Do I just go down the IT route, IT security, or do I go into the more business focused side of information security, which still does a lot of this stuff, but maybe not as hands-on on the technical. I basically had enough of the technical side, just keeping up to date with it constantly, whereas through my career I've got the foundational IT knowledge, which never will change as long as we're using noughts and ones and binary and networking infrastructure and so on and so forth, but it enables me, like I said, to sit in the middle and talk. So some people might want to go that way, some people might want to go just full on IT tech or ethical hacking, that kind of thing, and but it's understanding what all these areas are. I think you'll only get that by speaking to people in the industry.
And also building it, from what you said there, that foundation.
Yes. To
be able to kind of connect the dots and have those conversations.
I think there'll be a big shock to people that just go and get their cybersecurity degree and then expect just to walk into a well-paid job. There will be aspects of that, don't get me wrong. But I think there is an element, certainly when you're trying to influence board members, you can't just go and get a degree in that. That's built up over time and experience.
Well, when you say it sounds quite obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you put it like that, because ultimately it's kind of, you need to have a common language with somebody who perhaps doesn't know the details of your expertise in cybersecurity. You want to talk to them about those basics, which the foundations of it's a foundational knowledge for yourself, but also for other people. And you need to kind of have that language to be able to translate across the benefit of what you're proposing.
Because if you're trying to say do user awareness training, you've got to be able to engage with, if you're doing some say face-to-face training, you've got to engage them at their level. There's no point just standing there. They'll be asleep within 10 minutes.
I appreciate that.
So yeah,
good. Finally, as well, I mean, in addition to this, we obviously introduce you. The people will know the business and will probably be rapidly googling it. But beyond that, how can our listeners and viewers find out more about you and about what you do?
Obviously, the website.
Check that one.
Which we'll put out there, but do feel free to find either the business or myself directly on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
that's generally the focus of our socials. Talked about time and effort. I've not got time to go on. Cyber security isn't the most visual topic, so we don't.
Not some months. No, that's good. I mean, as part of our broadcasting of these podcasts, we'll introduce any sort of website links or social handles and things. So that'll all be provided to listeners. So I think, I've really enjoyed this. This has been really, really useful to kind of, hopefully it's been useful for you to kind of platform your business, but it's been really good from my side to understand more about you, trying to